So please take a seat. And I invite our speakers on stage already. For those who don't know me, my name is Laetitia Butchett. I lead the main association in Switzerland dedicated to immersive technologies, which is going to turn 7 years old in a month. So we're quite happy. And I'm here with a few people we will present afterwards for those who are interested in Swiss immersive productions and beyond. So I call to the stage our speakers of today, Zoe Roellin. You may have seen her piece already, Perennials. Chris Salter, Susana Panadés, and yes, Patrick, voilà. Oh, I don't have my clicker.
It's over here.
Oh, good, got it. It's like it's a game clicker. So we came up with this idea of sensory storytelling in XR, since we thought it was very fitting, not only for the island, but also for all the speakers involved today. On the island, you may have seen a lot of sensory experiences involving smell, like peuplé, haptics like Forager and Offwind, and speciality and music with other works such as Sen, for instance. So we thought, why not speak about sensory storytelling in XR with our wonderful Swiss talents here. First, sorry to come back to the partnership, but this is a co-creative panel. This is not, this is a Swiss Films sponsored panel, as you can say, and here is the director in the front row, Nicolas Ruffo, wave. Yes. And Fatuma, who has worked alongside me for this panel as well. Then for representing the GIF, give it up for Anaïs Emery, the director. And then Mathieu Gaillet, the newcomer to the Geneva International Film Festival, whom people know in the community for XR Must. And Cineforum, who is one of our main funding mechanisms in the French-speaking Swiss cantons, Laurent Kempf. And as partner, we also have one of the speakers, who is the immersive art space at the university, Chris, it's, how do you say it? It's ZHDK.
ZHDK, Zurich Hochschule der Künste, or Zurich University of the Arts.
Voilà. Okay, and Virtual Switzerland, which is the association I am the director of. So we'll start with the speaker, and I introduced Zoe Roellin already before. Patrick Mulroney, Christopher Salter, and Susana Panadés Diaz. They're not in the correct order. So we'll start with a little presentation of each and every one of the speakers. They will introduce their work and especially speak about what they mean with sensory storytelling. Then we'll have a short discussion with each of them, a general conversation, and then you can jump in and join for, you know, a more broader Q&A session. So this is yours, Zoe.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. In the background, you see my behind-the-scenes video about Perennials playing, and I'll just talk about the project for a bit. I'll keep the story description fairly short, since I already talked about that yesterday, but it's a story about two people arriving at their family's old abandoned vacation home and dealing with all kinds of difficult emotions about growing up, about legacy, about generational trauma. I think it's quite fitting that I'm the first speaker here, because technology-wise, we're starting out fairly simple. Perennials is non-interactive. There's no installation component to it, so you just have the Quest headset. So the senses that I get to play with are mainly sight and sound, obviously. And while creating Perennials, I wrote and directed it, and I also did almost all of the art and animation for it. I really wanted to use the visual and the audio aspect to create both a sense of presence and obviously immersion in the place of the story, and also to really heighten the emotions of the story. So actually very early on when I got to pitch a project to Meta, I immediately thought of doing something centered around this old house, which is actually inspired by a real life location. My grandparents own an old abandoned vacation home. And because it is the story all centered around the place, taking place in that house, all the emotions kind of catalyzed by that place, I thought it would be really fitting to make that into a VR experience where you can put the viewer themselves into these environments. Although when creating the art, there was also always a balance to be found between realism and stylization, because to some extent, both what you see and the audio, they're fairly realistic. I want to ground the viewer in this place. The scale of the environments is fairly realistic. The characters have quite a degree of detail to them, also to the way they move. But on the other hand, I obviously could have gone another round and even not use Quill, but use something like Blender to get way more naturalistic with the depictions. But what I really like to do is get a level of stylization in there where you have these environments constructed out of these very loose flowing strokes that almost seem to kind of fall apart at the seams. You have colors heightened to create more atmosphere. I play with light and dark a lot. And that's all because I want the emotions of the script to not only be present in the acting, in the dialogue, but also to kind of seep into every corner of the environment that the viewer is immersed in.
Thank you, Zoe. You actually describe yourself as a visual storyteller because you come from illustration, and that's the great thing about you, because you create directly in Quill, in your headsets. And you were saying to me that emotions are the immersion, and this is what you just said about filling out the space or not, but to convey the emotions in the right way. What is for you the difference between the illustration you do for 2D media and the illustration you've done with Quill in terms of conveying these emotions?
There is a lot of overlap, I would say. Techniques that you can use into the composition of a drawing, how a character is framed. For example, there's a lot of scenes in Perennials where a character is feeling kind of unsettled or oppressed, and they're almost caged in by parts of the environment. And at the same time, the viewer is also placed in some very tight spots, half hidden behind objects, to also convey that sense to the viewer. So that's like the additional thing you get to play with there, right? That there really is that sense of being there. And you can play a lot with camera placements. Also, I think about that quite a lot. If there's a scene where a character feels helpless, it might be really effective to have them set really small and far away to us, kind of feeling like really, really small in a huge, overwhelming environment, and so on.
Okay, so you're playing with tricks and tips from the illustration world, but then you were saying that you need to guide the attention of the viewer by bringing contrast. What do you mean with that? Since it's a colorful piece, and there are other pieces that are black and white, how do you illustrate that?
That's something that I mentioned in a conversation with you, and that I think a very, very important part of the visual in VR, of visual storytelling, for an experience like Perennials is guiding attention. I would say there's probably way more than 2 categories of VR experience, but let's say there's some that I think benefit from more guidance, and then some that are more based around, exploration, interaction. But for Perennials, I really wanted to tell this story, and I wanted to make sure that obviously the viewer doesn't miss anything, isn't confused. So it is a lot about anticipating where the viewer will be looking, and also guiding that by, as I said, contrast is a huge thing there. We are always naturally drawn to look at contrast, be it light against dark, be it density of information, like visual information against low level, and so on.
And this brings me to your critically acclaimed other piece in co-production with Joanna Popinska, The Choice,
There they
that
are.
that was very much, that was very much a contrast, what you were drawing in the scenes.
Yeah, it is. So The Choice is based on one central interview with a young woman called Christian who had to terminate her pregnancy. It's based around that theme, and visually it looks like you're actually put on the headset and you're seated across from Christian. And the part that I did, kind of all throughout her story, there's quill illustrations showing up around you. But The Choice really plays with that feeling of sitting across from someone, of like trying to create that personal connection. So from the very start, when I did the concept art for the illustrations, it was also very obvious that we want the intention to be in her, and we want to actually kind of limit the amount of information that is in the illustration. So a lot of the illustrations are just simple one or two colors, like strokes set around a big black background, very, very stylized, very reduced.
Exactly. And with that, we'll come back to more questions later. Thank you, Zoe. Patrick, this is a totally different environment, although it's about dance and movement and light as well. So I'll let you introduce your project.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here to talk about my next project, Rave. And do you have the remote for the slide? No problem. Thank you. So my next project, it's my first and my next project in virtual reality. I'm a Swiss filmmaker, and in 2019, I've made a short about rave and. Sorry, the video is not launching, but I'll go.
Oh, two clicks.
Yeah, I have to.
Sorry, forgot to tell you.
Don't think it's no problem. So I made a short film about friendship at a rave party, and building on that experience, I wanted to take the immersion of the party a step further, because dancing on raves seems I work on a lot in my movie, and it's with this in mind that I wanted to create a work that could give an even stronger of immersion than in cinema. So Rave is a virtual reality experience that recounts the last memory of a young woman at a rave party. It begins with a young raver inviting you to dance to the sound of the techno music, and your head and arms begin to move, immersing you in a most beautiful rave party. And we will be using the volumetric capture and the mocap, and with this you're immersed in her memory. But you have to be careful, because for the memory to unfold all the way, you mustn't stop dancing. And that's the whole concept of the piece. You have to get moving so that the memory can be told. In concrete terms, each movement of the body provokes an emission of luminous particles that you just seen, and which gradually reveal the world around the spectator. To make it possible, I'm working with my friend and colleague Melanie Cortina, whom some of you may know, as she presented a project here in Venice last year, and she will be the immersive artistic director on the project. Together, we will be working on the interaction of the work with customized point-and-cloud shaders like the one you just seen. It's a work of Melanie. She did for Palais de Tokyo, I think. And yes, so it's the whole point of the project. But beyond the idea of letting you experience a rave party, the question we have is, what is the materiality of our memories? And we want to propose our interpretation and our interpretation of them. So we'll be using photogrammetry for the place. This is the real place of the rave party. It's a very known place in Switzerland, in Crissier. And we want to, yes, we want to be a little bit documentary, and it's very important for us. So we will, it's the first test of the photogrammetry. And I'm convinced that the documentary aspect, combined with Melanie shaders, and with the point and cloud, will give a very singular result. So, as you can see, it's the first test, and when we will be entering the prototyping phase, we will record the whole bridge, and Melanie will start tapping the shaders. So here we are, still at the research stage. We are searching for co-production with my Swiss producer, but I'm lucky enough to have a passionate team, and with Melanie experience and talent, I can't wait to be able to present the project, and which is particularly close to my heart. So yes, thank you.
Excellent, Patrick. Thank you very much. So in your work, what is really the sensory matter of the project is more the movement, because the movement guides the scenario. If you stop moving, the scenario stops as well, and the memory of this lady, of what the rave was like back then, is fading away, right?
Yeah.
So how did you embrace the movement part of your piece?
It's like in a rave. You have to dance. You can go and just dance a little bit or dance in a huge way, but you have to dance. And for me, it's the whole concept. Like, it's very important to be in the immersive of what is a rave party, and because the first step for me, it was I remember my parents, they told me like rave party are very not for me, and I want to bring them a piece that they can test and bring the rave party to people. And for me, it's all about this sensory, and with the voiceover, we will give also pieces from what is to be in a rave. So you have the smell, you have all your senses, and you dance all the night with the sun rising after it. And so for me, it's all about experiencing your dance, your own movement in a poetic way of rave party.
And then the story evolves depending on your movements, or it is totally uncorrelated?
No, it's not the story which is evolving with the movement. It's what you see, what's the point on cloud. The point on cloud appears when you dance in a certain way with all the sound, and there is the bridge, and if you dance with if you watch the bridge appears. So it's all the interactivity is about where you see and where you dance. But the story, it's like the documentary way. We have some témoignage, how we say it?
Yeah, witnesses and
testimony. Yeah, and it's a real witness from people, from rave people, and for me it was very important to have this strong, this reality in the piece.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Yes, because it's more about the materiality, the movement, and the music. And this is a trend that is still ongoing, but I think it's more synthesized in a certain generation and at a certain point of time. So it's a documentary, we can say, right? Because you're a documentary filmmaker.
Yeah, also, yeah.
Okay. And so going from movement, we switched, and music and soundscape, we go to Christopher Salter from the Zurich University of the Arts, and the works you've been doing. You've been involved a lot with computer arts and music since a bit longer.
Long time. 20 years.
You've been around, as we say. So yeah, I'll let you have the clicker and go your...
Yep.
Yeah.
See if I can go to it. Okay. Thanks, Letitia, and everyone for coming. So I'm Chris Salter. I'm an artist and also director and professor of the Immersive Art Space at the Zurich University of the Arts. So the Immersive Art Space is a cutting-edge research, production, and teaching site for the immersive arts. We talk about immersion. What is actually this term? This is an old art historical term, but if we think about immersion as entangling the human body and the human senses within a technological environment, you get maybe closer to what we're thinking about. The Immersive Art Space has a team of 15 researchers. They're not students, trained in computer science, interactive media, game design, engineering, and performance theory and practice. And we're engaging in what you might think of as a kind of critical technical practice with these technologies. These technologies are everywhere, but what are the assumptions that these technologies hold in both their design and their use? And we're starting a very interesting research project focused on extended realities, futures. What does that mean? I'll show you in a few minutes, seconds, what I mean by immersive reality. But this is aiming to, let's say, take a critical and conceptual and creative approach to how bodily and sensory experience is being reimagined by new technologies, not VR, which is actually an old technology, but so-called mixed reality, a term that comes in the 1990s and is now being, let's say, made possible by devices like the Oculus Quest 3 and the Apple Vision Pro, which are coming out. And we're interested in basically how XR shapes bodily subjectivity and immersion and interaction in action, and how, for instance, different kinds of bodies may shape those technologies. So XR technologies are very ableist. Holding a hand controller is only possible if you don't have arthritis, if you have hands. So they're very, very much not meant for people who have disabilities. And so one of the issues we're trying to deal with is basically the normative understanding of these technologies and how people with disabilities could use them. We're trying to develop science fiction scenarios of the kind of futures of interaction that might be possible in these technologies. I will now just show you a quick trailer from an earlier project that I did before the Immersive Art Space called Animate, which was just presented in Canada. It tells the story of two broken people in Newfoundland, the most northern island off the east coast of Canada, who are on a journey to an area called the Tablelands. The Tablelands is a very interesting geological place. It's 450 million years ago, where the mantle of the earth can be walked on. And they are confronted in this piece by the animism of the earth. And this piece starts with theater, and then moves into a collective experience in virtual reality with a whole group of people, and then finally ends in where we're going, which is a kind of, let's say, worn augmented reality where people are in the room with physical, or let's say, virtual objects.
Double click. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And which button do I push for?
Double click, right?
Next. Yes, there. This was premiered in Germany at the Kunstfest Weimar in August last year and has been touring. So this is the Tablelands, this crazy kind of moon-like landscape in the middle of Grossmoor National Park. And these are two actors. Here, Judith Rosemeyer, a very well-known German actress. This is an Italian version of the production. So it starts out in this theatrical context with no headsets, and then the audience is brought into another room. This was in Germany. They're brought into another room. They're given headsets, and then they move through collectively on a rope this virtual reality experience. And so when they're walking across surfaces, they're getting water sprayed on them in very, very simple ways. And so they feel collectively that they're together, because usually virtual reality is quite isolating socially. And I'm very interested in the social experience of these technologies. And at the end, they are in this room where they see these rocks, and these rocks explode in the physical space, the virtual space, but they're in the physical space. They behave according to the physics of the actual environment that you're in, because we're using pass-through extended reality, which is essentially using the camera to see into the real room and embed virtual objects into that space. Thanks.
Is it live? The action, the performance?
It is live. That's the interesting thing. It's all happening in real time. And the actions of the objects and the sound are also altered by the real-time event.
Okay, thank you. We were speaking about spatial computing before, and here the sensory storytelling is making a lot of sense in what you just showed, because obviously there is rain, there is terrain, there is touch as well, but real touch, haptics.
Yeah.
How do you, for you, is spatial computing the coming of age of this sensory storytelling technology, really the tech behind
Definitely.
it?
I mean, again, if you look back, the first head-mounted display comes from 1968 from Elon Sutherland at the University of Utah. At that point, he was talking about the idea of inserting a computational model into the physical world, that the body would become what he called a kinesthetic display. And so the bodies were always imagined from the start in this so-called extended reality. And so spatial computing, a term which comes from 2003 from a researcher at MIT, basically describes the idea that computers have some understanding of the real physical world that we're in, some understanding of objects and forms, and then how is it that those objects and forms respond to us as human beings? So that very much traces that back to the histories of interactive media, which go back again to computing in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and reached their kind of peak in the 1990s.
And how is music interwoven in all that, in your work?
Yeah, so sound is very important. So for instance, in this piece, in the virtual reality section of it, we're using, typical virtual audio, using head-related transfer functions, and basically creating a virtual soundscape. This piece was originally made for the radio, and then we translated it into a physical context. And then the last part, which is very interesting, is the audio in the headset shifts into the real environment. So for instance, when you're walking in this physical space, you hear or you feel vibrations under 20 hertz, and you hear spatial audio in the room. So this relation between the physical environment and this virtual environment is essentially where this idea of, let's say, extended reality is going to go in the next 10, 15 years.
All right, thank you very much. And to extend into this discourse, I ask Susana to join. Yeah, you need to go back. Yes, thank you. Hey. Yes, and you describe yourself as a movement artist. So speaking of space, you're
Exactly.
a space hugger.
That speaks a lot to me, what I saw there. I am a contemporary dancer. I come from the stage, real-time performances, theater, with an audience in front of us. And in 2018, we did our first piece that was presented here in Biennale that was called VRI, where it was an immersive piece where recorded dancers were dancing around the audience, and then we in 2020 we became completely virtual, digital in the studio. So our dance company in Geneva, company Gilles Jobin, he's sitting in the first row, and there. We transformed our studio from a dance company into a digital mock-up lab studio. We have 42 motion capture optical cameras from the Swedish company Qualisys. And now we dedicated our dance to create digital work that we perform and we diffuse a lot from our studio. So basically, our work is very focused in the body, in the spaces that we create between each other, the dynamic that we construct, and the narration without words, only with the movement. This is what you see is one of the pieces that we are working on now. It's based on the universe of illustrator Thomas Ott, a Swiss illustrator from Zurich that he is specialized in scratchboard designs, and now we are creating this VR piece where his designs are getting into movement. So our interest in the digital part is very much how can we really explore inside the digital, and we have the fact that we have the cameras in the studio, we have really the time to really explore the movement, explore the bodies within, train the dancers, train the performers, which is very important because at least in Switzerland we don't have a lot of interpreters that can have access to the technology. Is extremely expensive. So now we have a lot of residencies in the studio where we welcome other artists and they can explore with the system. We can have discussions with each other. Like it's a very, very good moment to exchange about where are we going with this performative time, and how do we get the audience access to this medium. Our challenge is, of course, we don't use words, and for the moment we don't even use facial mock-up. So we just use the body and the gesture and to go through with the emotions to tell the story, which sometimes is sometimes it's narrative and sometimes it's much more abstract. But we believe that only with the movement we can already create very, very powerful scenes, and we create the tension between the interpreters. So voila.
Thank you, Susana. You were saying that you are a body storyteller, and I thought that was very telling because it is how you also proceed in your creative, in your creation. Actually, you start with character building, if I understand correctly, at least for the last piece, the Thomas Ott piece, and then you dance, you integrate the character.
The embodiment is one of the first things that we work. In this latest piece, Sunset Motel is very much characterized, and we have a space like it's going to be a VR piece, so people are going to probably, I don't know, it's very much in the scale of a human. I don't, and the expressions of the faces are very humanoid and like we can recognize. But when we work with other kind of bodies, the first things that we do is embodiment, like try to understand how this strange body to us, how it's gonna move, which kind of weight it has. It's a very big giant, so we need to maybe add some extra weight. So it's there is a lot of physicality on this embodiment part. And we really try to take time to explore and really take the most of it, of each body, digital body and environment, of course. Because you can do many things you can do everything you want. You can be underwater, you can be a giant, you can be everywhere in the space with particles so crazy, and I don't know, you can be nobody, like you can have nobody. So it's a very, very interesting, and it has changed the way I move as well, and it has modified also the way we work with the dancers. We have a different crew now. Instead of a light technician, we have a 3D artist. So the dialogues are very different now from the stage
and you're saying
point
that
of view.
What is interesting also in that piece in Sunset Motel, which we're very eager to discover, is that there is no dialogue, and that you're saying the movement is actually the basic language. And what you're doing, because you're not only the artist, but you're also a unity, Unreal or Unity?
I'm the integrator of Unity.
Yeah, exactly. Voilà. You integrate your dance, your performance into the avatar, and then you look at the avatar and how it responds, and if you need to add some amplification, actually, right?
Yeah, actually, very soon when we became digital, I had to put my hands on it. I don't know. I really had to see it, because the fact that you can see the choreography in 3D means that you can move around the dancers. You can really see your choreography from every and each angle. And for me, it was a very organic moment. Like, as soon as COVID arrived, I was doing my first donut in 3D and did all kind of tutorials, and I was integrating all the dancers and making choreographies like for the Comedy Digital that we presented here also in 2020. So it's a very organic thing for me to kind of close this circle. Like, we work with Gilles very closely in the casting and choreography with the dancers. I have to make the bridge between dancers and the tech part, like things that we can do, things that we cannot do. And then in the end, I integrate all the choreographies inside the 3D environment, so it's kind of like closes the...
It's an exploring creative process, right? You were speaking about exploring the movement, exploring that language, exploring the scenario unfolding depending on the movement, which is different from other speakers here. You write with your brush, and you go with the movement. Chris, it's like with the space, and you, it's with the movement. So perhaps you have questions for each other, because I think there are many links, and you haven't had a chance to discuss this, and I think it's interesting. It's an interesting conversation. I know that, Patrick, you had questions for Susana as well. And
yeah, because I never work in a mock-up space, and when I see the work, is very impressive. And you say it's changed the way you dance, and
It changed for me personally is because when you work on theater, like I mean, especially in contemporary dance, we are very minimalist. Like, you don't have a big set or big costume, so everything is very minimalist, and you work a lot between your mind, and also you never see yourself somehow. Like, when you do in real time, you don't see yourself. You get feedback from what it's all about. Now, bueno, the way we work, we always have the feedback with the screens. So that means that I see in real time what I'm creating with the body, and also the fact that I have a different body. Well, it's our way of working. There's other people doing other things, but the way that you have different body, you need to work like with another body. I don't know how to like.
are you many characters, or are you just one character?
Like, because we have this piece on tour at the moment that's called Cosmogony.
Yeah.
Cosmogony, it's a big fly of a camera that goes through different places in a city and in different environments. And the three dancers in the stage, when the camera arrives to a place, it might find a different kind of character, different body. Like, sometimes it's this big color things that you saw. Sometimes it's a very thin thing, big giant with little ones. So every time the camera arrives to the character, you need to embody like right away. Like so we are kind of getting ready, and then puff, we are ready in this huge
This bubble,
double,
this Totoro.
or flying in the sky, or as a big giant, or like.
What is difficult in your case, Patrick, is that the movement is induced for the advancing the story is actually the spectator, the viewer, the participant. Yeah. How many participants do you want to rave and vibrate on that music
in the
together?
piece,
Yes.
in the rave party? I don't know. I think it will be like 50 or 60 people around the spectator, but it will be like a different, because it's not animation, it's like a record. So we will keep a record en boucle, in a loop, and it will be less like energivore. Mm-hmm. It will less huge in a way. So it's like. yeah, we have to find the way to be in the rave, but in virtuality. But the spectator has to dance, and that's
And
a big point.
how do you engage the participant to actually start moving? Because rave is a specific music. You need to like it as well, you know.
Yeah, of course.
And I don't know what. Perhaps others.
It's
have
not
something
the
to say
techno
about
music doesn't come like very fast. It's like at the beginning a little music, like very smoothie, and you enter in a movement, in a little movement, and after it the story begin, and you have a tutorial. You understand you have to dance, and after it there is the girl, the raver that told you. Tell you what to do, and after it there is a rewarning, or when you when you do a movement, there is a luminous particle, and I think it's the warning will be interest the spectator. It's like
because there is an interaction.
Yeah,
and
so you
play.
create.
It's playful. Actually.
Yeah, it's playful, of course.
And this is what you have in common in your piece with Chris, who is also using using in a good sense the participant, whereas Zoe and Susana, you're more discovering the piece and what it brings to you, and where is the story, where it unfolds, perhaps more in your more than Zoe, perhaps where there is a very specific follow-up of each sequence, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
You were saying that the stitching was particularly difficult from a scene to another when you want to not cut the emotions and the thread.
Yeah, cuts in virtual reality are very hard to do, in that if you have your viewer looking at something and you do a cut where they're suddenly looking into nothingness, that's a really jarring experience that kind of takes you out of the story. So it's once again that very careful play of trying to anticipate where the viewer will look and making sure that in the next cut there is actually something there, you know, be it a character being an important detail. It's even more tricky when suddenly you get scenes where you have two characters in different positions, so you need to make sure that there's something in both of those positions in the next cut, and so on.
Yeah, and that I thought was very interesting, because it's actually about your movement in the quill and our movement as viewers in Perennials, in watching your piece. Chris, you wanted to add something about that?
No, I mean,
since you're the professor.
No, yeah. I mean, what's interesting is that, I mean, all of the projects here feature the human body as the central element. And in that way, virtual reality or extended reality is very, very different than cinema. I mean, we're in a cinema festival, but it's very different. It's actually the only media form that involves movement. All other media is involving sitting and watching, listening, things coming at a distance, coming to you. So all these projects involve the human body. And one of the most interesting senses, when we're talking about sensory, we always think about vision or hearing. But the most interesting sense in all these projects is proprioception, is the sense of your body in space. And as we start moving into a context where the physical environment starts to matter more than simply the wraparound environment. I mean, there's always a confusion between VR and AR, you know, but I mean, the difference really is that virtual reality closes off the world and builds a computational world that we interact within. Augmented reality, up until recently, was using a screen and overlaying information onto the real world. But now with, say, mixed reality, we are embedded into that world. So issues about bodily presence and plausibility of virtual things become much more tangible. So when in Animate, for instance, when these rocks explode, of course you're seeing them in the headset, but they move toward you and you move out of the way. And that's interesting because, of course, you know they're not there, but in fact they are there. Yeah, you do. And watching people, they constantly jump. And they run, and these rocks actually target people in groups using a very simple machine learning system, and they push them away, and they keep coming. What also becomes interesting is the fact that other people are doing that as well. So you see others around you, and that's also very different, even using avatars in virtual reality, where you always sense presence, but you're not really there. So there's a lot of work to be done in this kind of mixing of realities, but there's very little research on actually what will happen. What is social interaction? What's social presence in these systems?
And I certainly want to say that it's not lonely. It's not more lonely than watching a streaming platform from your bed. I mean, like we're experiencing here the world hubs and these wonderful VR chat and room worlds, and really, you are in collaboration and coordination with other people you don't know from all over the world. And I find that quite striking every time I put these headsets on, because it's wild. But perhaps the audience has something to say, because there are many professionals here who could help either or collaborate on productions, motion capture, volumetric capture, dance, obviously, and others. So please. Anyone a question? Please, a question. Yeah?
I can shout.
Yes.
Is Animate still able to be done somewhere?
Yes, it's actually touring, and we just showed it in Canada, in Mutech. Before that, it was shown in theater festivals. It's also really interesting when you mix the audiences together from film or theater. So yes, if you're interested, let me know. So.
And when are your two pieces coming out?
Sunset Motel is still in development.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
And now we are preparing an hybrid stage piece with motion capture live for the stage, and it's going to be in Geneva, premiered at the end of January 24.
Excellent. And Patrick?
We hope for next year.
Next year. And Zoe, well, you're here. You're the only Swiss artist at the official selection this year, so we're very proud. And you should be proud. We're going to Seoul afterwards together, so I'm also very proud to have her meet the South Korean scene. And you are working on other projects?
Nothing I can talk about.
Yes, this is why it almost slipped, right? But yeah, okay. So there are many great things happening in Switzerland, as you can tell, internationally. So please, go up to our talents and speak about your ideas, your wishes, perhaps, even co-productions. Don't forget about the Horizon Europe, Creative Europe. We're always interested, even though we're not politically a member state, but we are still available to talk, right? Chris, we've talked about that. Okay, so that was it. I don't know if anybody else has a question, or if you want casually to come and speak to our speakers afterwards, perhaps. Yeah? So this is a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.